Welcome to Chatsunami. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Chatsunami. My name's Satsunami and joining me for this driving adventure in Springfield is none other than the one and only SuperShadow271. Shadow, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be back so quickly.
Yeah, I was joking to you about this before we started recording, but your Twitch chat will be going absolutely mental when they realise you've come back for not one, not two, but 3 episodes.
Yeah, it's a new record.
Oh, absolutely. Next time you get a free coffee, so I'll need to get you back on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll get my punch card redeemed.
So, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
Not too bad. I am actually really excited to finally be able to talk to someone about this game because I have to say, my very good friend and co-host Andrew and I did it was so fun to do. We did a Simpsons month. And, I actually can't remember the month. I think it was August.
Shame on you not remembering the month.
I know. It was smart, okay? It was smart. All I remember was the weather was lousy, and indeed, I didn't touch Willie, but that's a story for another day.
Yes.
For all the Simpsons fans who got that, please explain to the non-Simpsons fans what I mean.
Yeah, that'll sound very, very different out of context.
But yeah, when we did the Simpsons month, we talked about a wide range of topics. We talked about the rise of the Simpsons, the fall of the Simpsons. We even did a retrospective on Groundskeeper Willie. That was not on my bingo card, but it was a lot of fun to do. But one of the ones that I really wanted to do, and I never really got the chance because my friends hadn't really played it for years, was the game that came out in 2003, and it was the 20th anniversary last year, which made me feel absolutely old.
20 years? I'm so old.
Can you believe that, though? I genuinely remember getting this game when it came out. I remember playing it. I remember being so excited to run home and pop it into the GameCube. And now, where has the time gone, Shadow?
I feel the wrinkles forming already. I'm aging so quickly.
How does it feel to be closer to the age of Homer than the age of Bart?
It's very, very strange.
Yeah, one of my friends told me that a couple of years ago, and immediately I was just like, nah, I don't like that. I don't like it.
I was actually going to mention how, I assume we'll get into it more later on, but how funny it is that a lot of the earlier Simpsons games were Bart-focused, and how far away that seems now.
Yeah, because before we jump into it and we talk about the absolute, I want to say pinnacle, but bear with us because we will get into the good, the bad, and the downright, I don't want to say ugly, but we'll get there. But yeah, today we are indeed going to be talking about 2003's Simpsons Hit and Run. Again, feel old for saying 2003 Simpsons Hit and Run, which was developed by Radical Interactive. It was published by Vivendi, and it absolutely took the gaming scene by storm. But it is something that you mentioned right there, which is fascinating because you're right. I think it was the SNES that had all of the Bart-centric games, so like Bart versus Aliens, I think.
Yeah, I think it was Space Mutants.
Space Mutant. Oh, okay, sorry. Boy, I hope someone got fired for that blunder.
Yeah, right. The funny thing about all the Simpsons games before Hit and Run 2 is they did actually come out for a pretty wide variety of consoles, but it's just funny to see the evolution of the concept of the Simpsons being represented in video games, because it's like almost entirely Bart, and then there's like one Krusty game, and then a couple itchy and scratchy games, and then after like Simpsons Hit and Run, it kind of just became the Simpsons,
Yeah, because the only other one I can think of that was relatively Simpsons-centric, and try saying that 3 times without whistling, was the Simpsons arcade game. Now, I actually remember this game. This is how old I am. I remember going to, and I can't remember the place exactly, but it was one of these caravan parks for holiday when I was really young, and one of the places that they had in there was this massive building where they had an arcade in, in and all of these different attractions for kids. And one of them was the Simpsons arcade game. And I always remember finding it quite weird because the premise of that was that Smithers, and again, it's a really weird premise, Smithers tries to steal a diamond, but he ends up stealing Maggie because she takes the diamond. And the whole point of the game is you're supposed to go and find him and everything. But you could kind of tell that they weren't really trying to pay homage to the series, if that makes sense. It's more as if they just had a beat 'em up game, but they put a Simpsons coat of paint on it.
That's basically what I would have said, is especially at the time too, because I believe it came out in 91 or so. So the template at the time would make sense to just be like, hey, just slap a skin of something recognizable on an existing well-liked gameplay style and then just slap that in arcades. And I mean, people do like the Simpsons arcade game, so it's not that it was bad, it was just more a visual thing than anything else, really.
Because, I mean, after that, and I have to admit, I'm trying to remember the timeline here, but after that, you had games like Simpsons Skateboarding, Simpsons Wrestling, which I don't know if they predate or they came after Simpsons Hit and Run.
I'm pretty sure they did.
I know Simpsons Wrestling predated Hit and Run because that came out for the PlayStation 1, but for skateboarding, I know that came out for the PS2, and I know that was really critically banned by both fans and journalists.
So was wrestling.
Oh god, yeah, don't get me started. I genuinely, between fighting Mr. Burns and fighting Bumblebee Man, I still get PTSD. Just flying fish coming into the ring as he beats me down. Oh, that was horrific. But anyway, that's not what this episode's about.
Right.
My untold trauma, as it were. But you're completely right, because the only other relatively popular game that came out in 2001, if you want to feel old, so 23 years ago.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. Can you believe it?
I just can't comprehend.
But yeah, that game was indeed Simpsons Road Rage, which surprisingly was very popular, and it was popular for a reason. It was popular because it was essentially a Crazy Taxi clone. Correct me if I'm wrong, but was it developed by Radical Interactive as well?
Yeah, it was.
Because I know there was something I read about that they had a 5-game contract or something with Vivendi. Yeah, and that was one of the games, so was Simpsons Hit and Run, and I think now that they don't have the rights to it, they can't legally, as far as I know, as of this episode, they can't legally create a sequel to the game, which does suck, but it's going to be interesting to see if they actually do anything with it, except for the tapped out game and everything, which that's a whole other topic in itself.
Yeah. My understanding was that the rights to make Simpsons video games was licensed, I think, to EA.
Yeah.
And it's not that they can't make a sequel, or at least maybe they can't call it Hit and Run 2, but they could theoretically make a sequel. It's just, I don't think any of the bean counters at EA are looking at a potential sequel and going, this is definitely something we need to do. I think everyone's a little hesitant to make another Grand Theft Auto knockoff.
Do you not think it's quite surprising, though, that after all this time, I mean, we are sitting here in 2024 about to talk about a game that came out in 2003 when the last Simpsons game that came out was in, I want to say 2010, 2011 maybe?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Give or take, definitely the 2010s with the Simpsons game. And after that, there wasn't really any prominent Simpsons game as far as I remember. And that's going beyond things like the Simpsons Tapped Out game or the cameo that they had in Lego Dimensions, you know.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, beyond those, there's not really been a prominent Simpsons game since, but it is absolutely wild to think that after all this time, people were still modding this game, they're still trying to bring it back. It's gotten to the point that I think that the PC version is considered as abandonware now, which for anyone who doesn't know is the concept to describe a piece of software that, well, as the name suggests, has been abandoned. It's not being updated, it's not being ported, there's no way to get it onto newer systems. So Simpsons Hit and Run, at least on the PC, this doesn't apply to the console versions, but it's essentially abandonware now, which is absolutely crazy to think that for something like that, that would usually be the death sentence for a game like this, but people are still persevering, they're still modding it, they're still recreating things, and it's it's wild. It's just it's absolutely wild to think how much of an impression this game has made.
Yeah, it's made an absolutely huge impression. One thing that I wanted to touch on is that it made such an impact, but I think part of what makes the game so important is, other than the Simpsons arcade game, which, I mean, came out long enough ago that people had kind of forgotten, is that the Simpsons never really had a standout game. I'm sure some of the games that they released were liked by people, but there was no one game you could really point to and be like, you gotta play that Simpsons video game. It was just generic tie-in stuff. And I feel like Hit and Run, I mean, Road Rage got part of the way there, but I feel like Hit and Run was the first one, at least in a long time, that was like, you gotta play this game, you know?
Oh no, absolutely. Because I actually remember when I was reading about this, that Road Rage got so bad in terms of being I want to say a homage, but let's face it, it was probably more likely a knockoff of Crazy Taxi, that Sega actually sued EA, Radical, and Vivendi because it was so similar. And from what I also read, the fact that this was supposed to be a sequel to Road Rage, and of course they changed it in development and they called it to themselves, apparently they called it Grand Theft Auto, as in OTTO, which I thought, okay, that's pretty funny.
That is good.
But yeah, it's absolutely crazy to think that despite all of that, and the fact that you're completely right, there were hundreds of tie-in games at the time, and that is something that I think that younger listeners tuning in just now probably won't understand, is the fact that there were so many tie-in games for films, for TV series and things like that. And I'm going to be honest, the majority of them were not great.
Oh yeah.
There might be some that ran against the mill, but for the majority of them, usually their cover art was really lazy, their gameplay was very basic as well. There wasn't a lot going on there, but despite the fact that this came out during the time where Grand Theft Auto 3 was probably the trendsetter at the time for what players expected, you know, they wanted an open world sandbox game, they wanted the driving from certain games. To think that they managed to pull it off is absolutely crazy. But see, without any further ado, will we just hop into our Canyonero, drive to the Quickie Mart, and, well, let's find out how this game is held up after 21 years.
Yes.
And, of course, we will be right back after Shadow and I stop crying, because we are getting old. 21 years.
Yeah, well, after I take all of my de-aging cream treatments and stuff.
And we will be right back after these messages. Welcome to Chatsunami, a variety podcast that discusses topics from gaming and films to anime and general interests.
Previously on Chatsunami, we've analysed what makes a good horror game, conducted a retrospective on Pierce Brosnan's run as James Bond, and listened to us take deep dives into both the Sonic and Halo franchises.
Also, if you're an anime fan, then don't forget to check us out on our sub-series, Chatsunami, where we dive into the world of anime. So far, we've reviewed things like Death Note, Princess Mononoke, and the hit Beyblade series.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps.
As always, stay safe,
stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated.
Hi, I'm SuperShadow271. You can find me over on Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and even Discord. I play and talk about a huge variety of games, so there's bound to be something you're interested in, especially if you're a Sonic fan. My content tries to be chill with some insightful commentary on games, so if you're interested, please check me out. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get back to Chatsunami.
In a quiet suburb, a diabolical plot is unfolding, and only one man can stop it.
Oh, do I have to?
The whole town's gone nuts. Security cameras, mysterious vans, crop circles.
Take the wheel!
I'm not a terribly mobile person.
And take to the streets!
Chest pain! Having chest pain!
To solve a mystery!
This conspiracy goes all the way to the top.
Play as your favorite Simpsons character and over 40 of Springfield's finest vehicles.
Eat Canyonero!
Best Simpsons game ever, says Electronic Gaming Monthly. Nintendo Power calls it a must-own for any Simpsons fan. It's time to save Springfield. By car. By foot. By the seat of your pants.
When's this going to start?
Oh, that's so fun it should be a felony.
Rated T for teen.
So essentially, if you go into Amazon and you order the anti-aging cream... Oh, sorry, we're back on. So...
No, I need to know. Message me later about it.
Yeah. My people will contact your people. It'll be fine.
Good, yes.
Sorry, that makes it sound as if I've got DH in people. Just in standby. The Red Panda lawyer's shaking his head in the corner going, what are you on about? What are you talking about? So, going back to what we were talking about there, the year is 2003. I'm curious to hear how you came across Simpsons Hit and Run before we dive into our thoughts on this, because have I ever told you how I came across Simpsons Hit and Run?
No, I don't think you've ever told me.
So, there was a shop, technically they're still around, but they're not as prominent, I suppose, as they used to be in the UK, called HMV. Have you ever heard of them?
Oh, I think I've heard of them, yeah.
I mean, they are popular, but they're kind of there just now. Although, if they make a comeback and they want to sponsor the show, you know where to find me. I remember years and years ago, there was an HMV that had a massive gaming section back when they used to sell games more prominently, but they had a massive gaming section at the back of one of their shops. And I remember at the very back, they had, I think it was like the Xbox or the PlayStation. It must have been the PlayStation, but they had the PlayStation set up in the corner and they had a copy of Simpsons Hit and Run. At the time, I had no idea that a new Simpsons game was coming out, and I was like, oh, look, it's Homer, Bart, etc. And they popped you into like the first level of the game, and I remember playing it and just enjoying it so much. That's another relic, isn't it? God.
Yeah.
Oh, because nowadays you can just download a demo onto your console and you never have to go outside. But I remember playing it for so long, getting to I think I got to the power plant, and I was running from the police, and I remember I got out the car and I'm like, they can't get me in here, only to get absolutely bodied by a police car. And I got the Hit and Run wanted status, and I turned around and there was this huge line of people behind me just waiting to play the game. I must have asked for it for Christmas or my birthday, but I absolutely loved it. When I got it, I played it, I loved it because I'm a massive Simpsons fan. I'm curious to hear what your starting point was for this game.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, I'm actually a decently large Simpsons fan myself. I had a nightly ritual with my family, which was to watch America's Funniest Home Videos, and then after that ended, we'd switch over to The Simpsons, and then after that would be bedtime. So I actually kind of grew up with a lot of Simpsons episodes, and my parents clearly enjoyed it. So I don't specifically remember when I picked up the game, but since I got it on the GameCube, it probably was one of those purchases that my parents looked at and said, oh, Simpsons, okay, sure, my kid likes Simpsons, here, have this. And I played it, and I remember thinking, like, I haven't really played a whole lot of games like that, because I didn't have a PlayStation. I had never played Grand Theft Auto, so it was kind of the first game of its type that I had really experienced, and I remembered being very enveloped by it.
Yeah, if it's any consolation, I also have it for the GameCube. My parents were very strict on the types of games I could play.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they didn't mind if I was 15 years old and a game was rated 15. Honestly, the floodgates opened, see, when I turned 15 years old, and I was like, I'm getting Halo, I'm getting Call of Duty. I went on a massive FPS binge that year.
Of course.
But yeah, I was not allowed to play Grand Theft Auto. I had friends who had it, who had parents that were a bit more lenient, but in my house, no, I was not allowed. So I'm completely with you there. Well, I suppose the only open world example that I could think of other than that was maybe Sonic Adventure. But let's face it, you couldn't steal cars in that. So,
yeah.
Point one to Simpsons Hit and Run. That is really cool, though, to hear.
Yeah. My parents weren't necessarily strict with video games. I mean, I grew up on a copy of Mortal Kombat 3 for the Sega Genesis because my parents had no idea what Mortal Kombat was. I think they just saw Simpsons and knew roughly what to expect from Simpsons, so they were okay with me having it, and I enjoyed it a lot.
That makes me feel old, because I remember the last time my parents freaked out about me watching a game was when my brothers had Duke Nukem 64.
Oh, yeah.
And if you remember the graphics for that,
I do.
Not very good in the modern age, but I remember I sat in with my brother, and then my mum came in and she absolutely freaked out. She was like, what are you doing showing your younger brother this absolutely mature bloody game? As in bloody on the screen, not her swearing, but makes me laugh thinking back on it because of how different it is nowadays. I have to admit, The Simpsons Hit and Run definitely toned it down.
Yes, absolutely.
Significantly. differently because you don't get people getting dragged out of cars. They have a transition, which I think is quite nice, unless it's your own car.
Yeah, I was about to say, there are plenty of cars that you have to walk all the way around to get into your car.
My cheat for that usually is just to stand on top of the car and then
Yes, yeah. That's exactly what you do. You jump on top of it, and then you just do the quick fade out and fade in.
God, honestly, we could kill it. See, for those old call-up services where it's like,
Oh,
do you
yes.
want to beat Simpsons Hit and Run? Call Chatsunami at 123. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, a hint line.
That's another thing that's gone now. I mean, for obvious reasons, the internet exists, but oh god, what is this game doing to us?
This episode has aged me 10 years already.
It's like, do you remember that scene from The Simpsons where it's Mole Man and he's like, my name is Hans Moleman, I'm 37 years old. He's just shriveled up. Oh,
Yes.
yeah, that's how I feel right now. I'm like, oh my god. Because it was such, and I want to emphasize this, it was such a different gaming landscape at the time. If you didn't know how to do something, you just had to work it out, or technically you could jump onto the internet, but I mean, I don't know how common dial-up internet was in 2003. Guess it was around, but not as prominently.
Yeah, it really wasn't very prominent.
Yeah, so you had to rely on, as you said, the guides, whether that be through phone or whether you bought them out a game shop itself, or you just played through the game and hoped for the best. And that's really the best you could do, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
This is something that I was talking to you about before we came on as well. But one of the things that I was really shocked at was when I played this game when I was younger, I remember absolutely loving it for reasons that we'll get into, but I remember loving it. I remember 100%ing the game because
Same.
Oh, it was so good. It kept bringing you back in for more. And then I heard that you could get like a hidden Itchy and Scratchy cartoon, so I collected all the cards.
Oh, yeah.
That's such a funny cartoon. But yeah, it was those things that made you want to push on and complete the game 100%. But then I went back to it a couple of years ago to play it for Twitch, and I can't remember why it was. I think it was either because I got 300 followers, I got some milestone. I loved it growing up, and I've got to say, it definitely has warped my perception of it. Did you feel the same way? Were your rose-tinted glasses firmly on before you went back?
Oh, yeah. So I only just recently replayed it. Started a couple of weeks ago, finished yesterday, and I gotta say, there was a lot more about the game that I was nostalgia blind to than I ever remembered. Definitely, for one thing, the graphics. I remembered it being pretty good looking, you know, like it's a decent representation of The Simpsons, but nowadays it looks so plasticky and weird, and especially the cutscenes.
Oh, they are horrible.
Yeah, weirdly fuzzy and soft, and like, it's just so weird.
I mean, what I find weird about them as well is it wasn't even any better in the show, but there was a Treehouse of Horror episode where Homer goes into the 3D realm in his own house, and it's a very similar model to what they use in Simpsons Hit and Run. I think it's probably better in the show, but oh god, you're completely right. It's just, I feel as if they used the same models from Road Rage, I want to say, and upscaled them, but again, upscaling didn't do them any favours.
I was gonna say,
yeah, because something I have to admit that I did love about the Simpsons game that came out many years later was the fact that they committed to more of a cartoony style.
The cell shading.
The fact that they had those cell shaded textures on them rather than whatever the hell they were coming to in the 2000s.
Yeah.
I don't know, because it's so jarring watching it. And that's the thing, I don't ever remember, I remember some bits looking really good, but I never remember thinking, wow, this is the future 2003. Yeah, I always remember being like, this isn't as good as I think, but you look past it because you're a Simpsons fan, you're a kid, you think, you know what, it's the Simpsons, I'm going to love this. But oh my god, I think the worst bit of that though, and I don't know if you've noticed this as well, is the background characters.
Oh yeah, the background characters are very rough.
I mean, props to them for actually including background characters, but oh my god, they genuinely look as if they've just been rushed out, and I get that's probably for maybe resources or to fill up the city but not draw too too much attention into it, but it's just as bizarre. It's bizarre when you get a close look up at them and they genuinely look worse somehow than Homer and Marge and such.
Well, what's funny for me is if you had asked me when I was playing it as a kid, I probably would have said, oh, it feels like I'm actually in Springfield. This feels so close to the show. And now that I look back on it with modern eyes, I look at it and I go, this looks so gross. And, I'm not generally one to care about graphics, but it is something where I feel like if you're adapting a TV show with such a strong art style, it's hard to not notice these things.
Because I think one of the things that does detract from it is, and again, this is something that I would say is one of the highlights of the game, is just the amount of references.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, oh my god, I think it's from season 1 up to, I want to say 12 or 13. It's roughly the early teens, and I am sounding like such a Simpsons nerd for this, so I apologise.
You're fine.
But it must have been about season 12-ish, or round about that time, because the reason I say that is how they had references for things like the Tobacco Plan. They've got all the references in the Quickie Mart, like Larry the Looter, Jasper in the freezer.
Yes.
They've got the silent alarm next to a poo as well.
Yes.
They've got the don't eat beef, eat veal poster and things. Yeah, they've got, oh my god, honestly, we could have a whole episode just listing off every single Easter egg, because you've got the tire fire as well. It's chock full, and that is one of the things I absolutely adore about this game. I think the studio who made it clearly had a passion for the show.
That is, I think, what separates it from a lot of other previous Simpsons attempts, is that it didn't so much feel like they were putting Simpsons things into an existing thing. It felt like they were actually trying to essentially recreate the Simpsons world. I remember it feeling so authentic, for lack of a better term.
But I mean, that is one of the drawbacks to it, and this might sound like a bit of a nitpick, but going back to one of the references I made there earlier with the billboards that pop up in the game, and there's ones like the got milk and eat veal instead of beef one. The reason I brought that one up is because for some reason they use the artwork from the show.
Oh, yes.
Rather than
3D
rather than the 3D models. And it feels so jarring. I don't know how they would have translated it, but it's kind of weird having all these 2D models and thinking, oh yeah, The Simpsons looks a lot better in the show than it does in this game, even though every level is just chock full of references. There's some that they didn't even need to include, like the Jebediah Springfield one, where you can literally kick off his head, which was an episode.
Yes.
I think that was in season 1, that episode. Apologies, I watched that a lot of Simpsons for Simpsons.
Yeah, no, I've seen a lot of Simpsons myself, but I never really paid attention to the seasons and episodes. I just remember events happening.
I would definitely say that is one of the highlights, that there is such a care and just absolute passion for the IP of it. See, if I could say the game had the love for the IP and amazing gameplay and everything, then this episode would be over now. We would be saying 10 out of 10, go play it, get a copy, go jack up the prices of it, as it were. But I'm going to be honest, and this is probably where, unfortunately, we're going to have to take off the boxing gloves here and just start wailing on this game. What are your opinions, first of all, about the gameplay, going back to the game?
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of gameplay things that don't sit as well with me today as they did when I was younger. You move so slowly when you're not in a car. It's incredible. I don't remember moving so slowly. The double jump was really wonky. I don't know how to exactly describe it, but I remember the timing for doing the stomp attack was always very finicky for me when I was replaying it. The levels also, they were open world in a sense, but it never felt like you could build up a good speed, It always felt like there was something getting in the way.
Yeah, no, that's an entirely fair point, because there's a lot of turns, a lot of corners, and I've got to be honest, Gran Turismo, this game ain't it. Burnout, this game ain't Any other driving game? No. It's not the worst I've played, I have to say, because I have played Grand Theft Auto 4, and that is very wonky in terms of driving, but I would say it almost reminds me of a Ubisoft game.
You know, I actually kind of agree with you on that. It does feel a lot like a Ubisoft game.
In terms of it being, and for anyone who's played a Ubisoft game, like, you'll know what I'm talking about here. It's very boxy, the way you drive. I know, obviously, it's unfair to compare it to newer titles like Grand Theft Auto 5, where the driving is pretty good in the way it handles, but it's kind of like the way theirs operate is, you know, you're in a box model almost, and it's really clunky to turn and make those sharp turns, especially when you're chasing after someone.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I got really frustrated when I replayed it because there were so many missions where it was like you had to collect things, but you missed it, so you had to do a 3-point turn, and by that point, the guy was already away, and it was just an absolute nightmare. And that is another thing I want to bring up. The fact that the gameplay loops aren't as endearing in old age, I want to say.
Yeah.
Because it's more or less the same missions, and I get why they're doing it. There has to be a limited amount, but it's mainly you're either racing a car, you're destroying a car, or you're banging into the back of a car just so that you can collect whatever falls out of it. And that's one that frustrated me because the game is never consistent when you hit it, whether or not it's going to generate a box or whatever you need to collect. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it makes baby Jesus cry. So...
Well, what I found particularly, I don't know if I'd say frustrating, it was a strange equalizer that traffic would spawn in as it should in a Grand Theft Auto game. And the way they designed it, the AI would constantly be hitting traffic. So a lot of the missions for me were actually really easy because inevitably the car would run into a car head on and they would just get stuck and I just drive back and forth into it. So it strangely made things easier, but it is also difficult when you're just freely trying to drive or race and cars will spawn in at what feel like exactly the right point to really knock you around.
I have to admit, that's one of the things that really annoyed me going back to the game, because I don't know if you got this issue, but sometimes I would be driving in traffic just normally, and then all of a sudden a car would make a sharp turn into my lane, or if they were trying to avoid me, they purposely tried to hit me. It was really weird. And again, I don't know if that was a commentary on driving in America or what, but I was like, what is going on here? It was really bizarre because of all the driving games I played, whether that's Grand Theft Auto, Crazy Taxi or whatever, I've never really experienced it too much. So to purposely get hit by the AI, I think it's just probably the way it's been programmed, but it was really weird.
Yeah, no, I've noticed, because a lot of times I tried to just drive down the very middle so that way I could avoid a car if it spawns in. But I noticed a lot of cars would try and merge once I got within a certain distance. And I feel like that was very much intentional. Like they wanted to get cars in your face to prevent you from reaching your goal. And that was irritating.
I have to admit, I wouldn't have minded that as much if the crash physics weren't so damn realistic. Because it's like when you hit a car, you stop dead. So all of your momentum just disappears. See, if you're racing or you're chasing someone, forget it. You might as well restart now because you are dead in the water and you can try to pick up speed. But a lot of the early cars are extremely slow and it's so frustrating to try and pick up momentum. But even if you find a fast car, because in the early levels you can get faster cars. In Homer's level, in the very first level, you get the rocket car.
Oh, I love that rocket car.
See, I love it as well, but it is so squishy. As soon as you bump into anything, it just instantly explodes.
Oh, it's very fragile.
And for anybody wondering where that car came from, I believe it was Chester J. Lampwick's, the creator of Itchy and Scratchies, which, oh my god, I'm such a Simpsons nerd. I'm sure that's where it comes from, because I thought it was the Honor Roller initially, but that's Bart's car, see, in the very first one with the, well, technically it's Martin's car. Okay, I'll stop. But yeah, I have to admit, the variety of cars, despite harping on the driving gameplay there, it's not great, but I do appreciate the diversity in the cars you actually get to drive.
Yeah, definitely. It's nice that they gave each car different stats and they're visually different and they all have kind of their own style. So it's definitely engaging enough to keep going.
And it gives you that sense of replayability as well, because something I was surprised at, and we will come on to the story soon, don't worry, but something I was really surprised at was just the fact that you could go back to other levels after you completed the game.
Yes.
And that meant as well that you could easily call up cars that you've collected throughout the game, and you could just use the Canyonero in the first level instead of using the sedan. You could, pretty much roll around in the honor roller. There was so much versatility there. I have to admit, I wasn't a big fan about the way you had to collect coins for it.
Yeah, the coins are a real flow breaker.
Yeah, because don't get me wrong, sometimes it was really easy to get coins, but then other times that is a perfect way to describe it, a flow breaker, because it was, you would be just flying through the game and then there'd be a level where it was like, oh, have you been enjoying buying all the other cars and buying the other outfits? Well, you need this one specific car or this one specific outfit, otherwise you're not allowed to go further. And it was so frustrating. You had to get Lisa's cool outfit at one point, you had to get Marge's cop outfit in another. It was really annoying, but you're completely right, it just killed the pacing of the game at times. And if you didn't have enough coins and you've already collected the boxes, then you're like, oh great, now I have to kick down the lampposts and things, or I have to run over things like trees,
or do one of the extra race challenges.
Actually, I'm quite curious to hear your thoughts on this. Did you fill up the hit and run meter really fast?
Yeah, that is actually something I was going to mention too. The hit and run meter fills up a lot faster than I remember.
Yeah, same here. So for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about there, if you hit too many objects, so if you hit too many lampposts or trees, any breakable things for the most part,
or people.
And people, yep, I was getting to that. Then for some reason they would have a very similar to what GTA had with their 5-star wanted system. Then the police would come and track you down, and if they caught you, then they would take money off you, which again was very frustrating because you're trying to get money, but you can't get money because the police are taking money off of you. Oh, it was just so frustrating.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it feeds into this loop where it's like you're breaking stuff to get money once you've exhausted the Buzz Cola boxes. There isn't really a great way to make money outside of breaking stuff. So it seems like the game punishes you for doing what you need to do.
I have to admit, have you heard the story of what Matt Groening did when he first played the game?
No, I don't remember this.
So apparently, and I don't know how true this is, but I have heard it from a lot of sources, so I just want to believe. See, for once, I just want to believe it's true. But apparently, when they were introducing the mechanics of the game, there's a mechanic where you pick people, but of course, a lot of people describe this as a kid's version of GTA, so there's no blood and people who fall over, it's very comical, they're flailing their arms, it's not anything overly violent, but again, that's another thing that gets your hit and run meter up. And I remember someone saying that they were very nervous about putting it in because they were worried about what Matt Groening would have thought about it, and they were like, whatever you do, don't go around kicking people, or especially don't go around kicking Marge. So the first thing Matt Groening did was kick Marge to the Quickie Mart, which I think is absolutely insane. But what I was also thinking was, there is no way he had the hit and run meter on.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, he must have turned that off because there's no way he could have got to the Quickie Mart without triggering that. But I actually thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that is really funny. As annoying as it was, they at least did it, I don't know if I'd say they did it well, but they did it in a way where you would get busted and then you'd essentially just respawn exactly in the same spot. So it's not like you were punished too harshly, not like you got taken to like a jail location and have to go back.
I still don't like it, but true.
There are worse ways to have done it.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, there does have to be some consequence in the world for the Grand Theft Auto games. There's got to be some consequence for you doing doing things. So I understand it mechanically. It just feels like there was probably better ways it could have been done too.
I mean, especially for, I don't want to say a kid's game, but let's face it, it was probably getting more marketed towards the younger Simpsons fans.
Yeah.
Myself included. Yeah, actually, moving on to, it might be right to say this part of the game is divisive, but will we talk about the story of the game?
Yeah.
So, especially at this period, I think The Simpsons was probably going through a bit of a rut with the show itself, and for anybody who wants a whole month of Simpsons content to hear our thoughts on that, definitely go check out our Simpsons Month episodes. But yeah, there was definitely a decline in quality, and I wouldn't say that this game was affected by that, but The Simpsons was always considered to have a really high standard of writing. But ironically enough, when it came to the games, as we were talking about in the intro, the fact is that they just slapped a Simpsons skin on a lot of games and were just like, yeah, we'll just call it The Simpsons Beat 'em Up or The Simpsons XYZ, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
Simpsons Crazy Taxi, as it were. But when it came to this, they actually did put in a little bit of effort, I have to say, because they brought back the original voice cast, they had a proper team to write for it, and it's absolutely amazing. The one thing that I do find a little bit weird is, as I said before, the game is split into, I want to say 6 levels, is it? Or is it 7?
Yeah, I think it's like 7.
You end up going to 3 particular areas in Springfield. You know, you go to the suburbs, then you go downtown, then you go to the port, I want to say, downtown.
Yeah,
downtown.
the docks.
Yeah, with the casino and whenever they released the hot pants.
Yes, Yara, the hot pants.
You know, they're all cool areas, but then it's kind of disappointing that although they do change a couple of things around, it is disappointing that you realise it is the same 3 areas, but you're mainly focused on 5 particular characters. So you play as mainly the Simpsons family, you play as Homer, Bart, Marge, and Lisa. But then the 5th character, for some reason, is a poo.
That felt a little out of place.
It feels really, really weird. And I know, obviously, there's controversy about his recent portrayals and everything, but I just don't get that. I really don't get, of all the characters they could have brought in, because obviously they're not going to bring in Maggie, because she's too young.
Yeah.
I mean, she's old enough to shoot Mr. Burns, spoilers.
Yes.
You know, she's not old enough to drive a car or commit Grand Theft Auto, hopefully. So here's a question for you, though. Who would you have instead of Apu? If they didn't choose him, who would you choose to replace him?
You know, that's a good question. I would have to think about it. My initial gut reaction was Principal Skinner, but I don't know how well that would really work. It's something I'd probably have to think on. I admit, it's probably hard to come up with a 5th character, so I don't plan on criticizing them just because it's a difficult task. It's just something that I feel like might have had a better solution.
I mean, of all the characters, and this is something I brought up earlier when they called this game Grand Theft Auto, I'm actually surprised they never got Auto in.
You know what? Yeah, that I can't believe I didn't think of that either. Yeah. Auto would have made a lot of sense.
It's just, and again, like, I've got nothing against Apu being in the game, except some of his lines that he repeats is a little bit dodgy, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know, please go look it up in the YouTube video, because throughout the game, a lot of the characters will repeat certain sentences and phrases depending on what you're doing. Some of them are more endearing than others. Homer's are obviously quite endearing, but some of Apu's and maybe Lisa's, you're like, oh, we're saying this sentence again, and you're like,
Yeah, that was kind of par for the course for the time, though. A lot of games thought, oh, we should have our character say something when an action happens, but obviously you can't have it generate something new every time, so you would end up hearing the same couple of voice lines again and again and again.
It got really annoying really fast, I have to say.
Yeah.
Because at least you can expect it with someone like Homer. There's nothing going on up there. The relative main character out of all of them. But yeah, it's an interesting, and this is your spoiler warning. I know we're quite far into this, but this is your official spoiler warning if you don't want to be spoiled for the story for it. But what was your reaction to the ending? Or not the ending, but the kind of reveal about what was going on in Springfield when you first played it?
It's funny, when I first played the game, I remember thinking like, oh, that's a pretty cool concept. When I replayed it, though, it definitely had much less of an impact, because they already hinted that aliens were the ones behind the cola since the very beginning. So you already knew it was the aliens, it's just why that you didn't know. And their explanation of it being a TV show that they're broadcasting to the universe felt kind of just out of nowhere. Like, there was nothing to otherwise indicate that.
See, it's definitely on par with Simpsons' zaniness, but I wouldn't say it's completely out of left field, because you're right, it is heavily implied that it is from outer space, because even when you look at the Buzz Cola, like the coins and the symbols and things, it clearly looks like a planet,
Yes.
you know, with the ring and the big antenna coming up.
They even have billboards that say it's for humans. Of course, they are already trying to tell you it's the aliens.
And of course, Kang and Kodos are the only aliens that we know of in The Simpsons beyond, well, Futurama, but I think it would have been too early for a crossover at that point. I have to admit, see, for the first half of the game at the time really gripped me. I absolutely loved this game when I was trying to find out where Bart was, and then you find him and he's speaking gibberish and you have to get to the bottom of it. That was really cool and that was really interesting. But then after the reveal of it kind of got a bit silly, and I can't believe I'm saying that about a Simpsons game where you drive around blowing up cars and things. But yeah, it kind of got a little bit silly, and I have to say, see the difficulty curve after that point, it just shoots up entirely.
Yeah, there are definitely some missions that are kind of difficult, although I find that the fact that a lot of the elements are random kind of evens out. Like I said, I got a lot of instances of cars colliding with oncoming traffic in a way that felt different. I would retry the mission and then it would play out differently, and it feels like it just kind of randomly did that, you know? So it was already somewhat difficult, I would say, but the latter half of the game definitely is a lot harder.
One of the things that I actually didn't realise was a feature of this game was the skip function. So you probably played this game better than I did, mind you, so you didn't see it. But if you failed a mission too many times, then the game prompted you to skip it.
I genuinely had no idea that existed.
Yep, that's how bad I was at the time. I mean, in my defence, I was playing it for like hours straight. Your Honour, please. Please let me back. Give me the GameCube back. Yeah, apparently it did. And obviously for the very final mission, it didn't give you it back. I don't know how to feel about the final area, as it were. One thing that I did like about it was the fact that they weaved in all of the Treehouse of Horror stuff in there. So you had Homer as a donut head thing, and you had all the alternate skins. It was so well done.
Yeah, can I just say also, the zombie portion of the game, I love how all the cars are like traditional spooky theme vehicles. And I was so disappointed, even back then, that they didn't let you have those outside of that mission.
Yeah, the only one you can get is, well, it's the ones you buy. There's the one that's, I can't even remember what it is. It's the purple one that's like a hearse, like a pimped up hearse.
Oh, yeah, that one, I mean, is required by the story. But I just meant like the cars driving around where you could be a ghost ship and it's got someone rowing and that's just how it moves forward. That's amazing. I would have loved that in any other section.
And the witch's broom as well.
Yes.
It was so creative. I'll give the game this. It did not run short of creativity. They went all in terms of, as I said, the references, the ideas behind it. And I have to say, I know I kind of criticised the story there to say, oh, it got a bit silly in the second half, but I'll give them props for actually going all in for it.
Yeah.
It might be a wee bit silly, but you know what? They did a damn fine job. Well, I say they did a damn fine job, but I have one particular gripe to bring up. Before we go back to the positives again, I have one particular gripe, and I think you know what I'm going to bring up here.
Mm-hmm.
That, of course, being the final mission, or rather the final 3 missions. So basically, at this point in the story, for anyone who doesn't know or doesn't remember and doesn't care about spoilers, there is a scene where you have to take 3 separate cars and you have to drive to the nuclear power plant. Then once you get there, you have to pick up a container of nuclear waste. So then you have to drive all the way back to the other side of town to drive it under the UFO, and then the UFO sucks up the car and it explodes, and you have to do that 3 times throughout the final chapter. Whenever you have the nuclear waste on the back, it is so sensitive. If you so much as look at a curb the wrong way, it blows up and you're like, oh, you have to go back. And to make matters worse, there is a time limit.
The third time limit in particular is very tight.
Oh, I'll get there. So for the third one, basically, this is something else that annoys me right enough, because for all 3 of these, I think the first one you play is Snake, or you use Snake's car, and the second one it's Frank, or it could be swapped about, but you have to use these other people's cars, and you think, okay, that's not amazing, but I'll use them. But then you get to the third one, and you have to use Grandpa Simpson's Hellfish Jeep, and it's not the best at handling, but as you said, the time limit is so unforgiving, so much so that you need to take shortcuts, but shortcuts basically involves going over the tire fire, making sure that you land correctly, you don't bump into anything, you have to go through a graveyard as well. But then when you get to the school, there is one of these black limousines or black cars that follows you, and you have to get rid of it, and then you have to basically get to the school and get the car sucked up. And I essentially raged at this mission, because I completed it when I was younger, so I thought, you know what, if years old Satsu could do it, then what's stopping me from doing it when I'm an adult? I'm an adult, I'm a gamer, I can do this. So I managed, after several attempts, I managed to get the Jeep underneath the UFO. So it's lifting up, it is a beautiful sight. I'm ready with my end speech, I'm like, oh, I can't wait, this is going to be amazing. And then the game cut out and it said, time up, you failed. And I kid you not, it was pretty much a pixel away from completing the game. So close. And because the timer still counts down when you're underneath the tractor beam, there's nothing you can do really. And that is so frustrating. I hate it with a passion. I don't think that's a hot take for me to be like, oh, this is a terrible level, because I think a lot of people feel that way.
I'll be honest with you. So I consider kind of arcadey driving games to be my forte in gaming. So I didn't encounter nearly as much struggle as I think you did. But that final mission took me 3 retries, and the second one I had to retry because when you're getting into the school playground, there's a ramp that lets you jump over the wall and get to the diamond, the baseball diamond in the back. And I took that jump so fast that I couldn't turn and stop my momentum in time. So despite having otherwise made it to the playground, I crashed into the gate behind the diamond and lost the barrel of waste. And that was pretty tough. I didn't find it to be nearly as difficult. I think just for me, more the frustration of the elements being so inconsistent, because the barrels sometimes would explode and sometimes wouldn't on certain hits. I was never entirely sure what triggered it.
See, that's the thing that really makes me contemplate whenever I do criticise this game, because I keep thinking, is the inconsistency because certain elements have been designed quite rough in a way, or is it just this game showing its age? Because as we said, it's 21 years old now.
Yeah.
Is it just because it's a product of its time? Would you say that this game is a product of its time?
Yes, I would definitely at least say that. But I do think it has some elements that are really good. I think just as time has gone on, I've come to realize how many elements weren't really that good in retrospect.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah, because as a kid, I didn't play a lot of games like it, so I had no frame of reference. So a lot of the elements were like, that's just how it is. But now that I've played a bunch of games, and now that I've gone back to it, I see like, wow, yeah, this is super frustrating compared to what it could be.
Because I have to say, when I started streaming, one of the things that I aimed to do was play games that I grew up with. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't going too far back. I was focusing on things like the Call of Duty games, Sonic Adventures. And by adventures, I mean 1 and 2. I wasn't getting that wrong. Just in case anyone's like, you know what you mean Sonic Adventure? Simpsons Hit and Run was definitely on the chopping chopping block for that. I thought, I can't wait to play Simpsons Hit and Run. It's going to be so amazing. I'm going to warn you all now, if you are an absolute fan of this game when you were younger and you want to go back and replay it, there are some harsh truths that you are going to have to deal with this game. Unfortunately, it does not hold up in terms of gameplay, but in terms of just pure heart and soul, I can't believe I'm saying this about a game because it's such a strange middle ground for a game. Because usually when I review games like this and talk about them, it's either, oh, the gameplay is amazing, but the story sucks, or vice versa, the story's amazing, but the gameplay is terrible and everything. For this one, I wouldn't say the story's necessarily strong, but I feel as if the gameplay comes across a lot worse, especially with that mission that Bart has to do for Dr. Nick, where you have to collect the monkeys.
Oh, yeah.
That made me cry that night, not gonna lie. That was a hard mission, I'm not going to lie. Not because it was emotional or anything, but just the sheer having to find the last monkey and running across the city square just to get it. Oh, I was absolutely raging by the time I got through that. I was like, oh, is this where we are now? Is this where we are?
I think the mission that gave me the most trouble was, I think it was in the Bart section. I think it was, you had to pick up like 5 trash cans and then collect 5 trash cans throughout like downtown and then drive them back to Dr. Frink. And that mission was it was frustrating because it had a very clear path for all of the places you were supposed to go, but that path wouldn't let you reach the goal in time. So you actually kind of have to do it out of order, and that really frustrated me.
The thing that annoys me about that as well was the fact that it was so early in the game, because usually you would think for a game like this, the first level should be easy, second one slightly harder, and then it progressively gets harder the further you go into the game. But in this, there's sometimes where it's like you'll play the first couple of missions absolutely fine, then you get into Bart's and it's like some of them are absolutely really easy, and then others you're like, why is this in the second mission, or why is this in the second level of the game? It's absolutely crazy. And again, I don't know if that's just because it is a game of its time that they think, oh, we're going to do this mission, and they had the idea for the mission, and not so much the execution to follow through with it. Because as I said, there's a lot of repetition in this game. You have the collections, the destroy missions, the racing missions, and some of those racing missions, I have to admit, are just so frustrating.
Yeah.
Especially the comic book guy one and the second mission, because again, you're locked essentially to one car. And if you don't get a perfect run, then essentially you're going to lose and you have to retry again and again until you actually get to the end.
I honestly didn't have a whole lot of trouble with them, but there are definitely missions that I can imagine a lot of other people would have issues with. So I get where you're coming from.
But I mean, of course, we can't end this episode on a negative note because the wider community would absolutely kill me. But yeah, what are your final thoughts about this game? Between the gameplay, the story, the legacy it leaves behind. What are your thoughts?
So, I've had a lot to say, and yeah, some of it's negative, but I think, as you were saying, the heart of it really makes the game shine, because it was the right game at the right time, with the right mix of elements that just all made it really work. And I think that even going back to it and remembering how tough some of the things were, I think it still has its charms, and it's got a special place in my heart. It really does.
Again, I know I'm going around like a broken record, but it is absolutely crazy to think that after all these years, as we said, 21 years on, we played this game growing up as kids, and usually for these types of games, you play them, you say that was a great game, and it goes to the complete back of your mind and you think, all right, I'm never going to play this game again, or maybe I'll play it on the off chance that it pops up, let's say, like a gaming day or something like that. But the fact is that even today, people have started to try and remake it. There's a guy on YouTube, I cannot remember his name, that's terrible, but he was doing a full remaster of the game in, I think, Unity he was building it in, and he was like changing all the textures, he was changing the graphics and things. It looks absolutely incredible, to be quite honest. As I said, you've also got the mods to bring back other cars into the game. It's just so surprising that people still love this game enough because, let's face it, there's so many childhood games out there that probably will never get this type of attention. But the fact is, because of its IP, The Simpsons Hit and Run has left its mark purely with Simpsons fans as well. But I think that is something surprising, especially at the time, because not many games gave respect to the IP that they were basing their entire identity on, as it were. They would usually just, and apologies for the horrible analogy here, but they would basically wear the IP like a suit, and they would be like, oh, look, I am Series of Unfortunate Events game, which I have to admit, that was actually quite a fun game.
Oh, really?
I remember enjoying it at the time, but I haven't had the courage to go back and play it. But you know, it's like they would wear it and they'd be like, oh, right, this is a game. And you're like, it's not as great. But as we said, there's so much love, care, and attention to this game. The one thing I would say, leaving off, is I genuinely don't know if this game would have been successful if it wasn't a Simpsons game.
Yeah, probably not.
I don't want to be cruel on the developers because honestly, one day I would absolutely love to talk to people who worked on this game to say, what were you thinking for this? What were you thinking for that? And obviously a lot of it will have to do with the technology they were using and basically the blueprint, as it were, for what they had, because this was supposed to be a sequel to Road Rage, so a lot of assets from Road Rage came over to Hit and Run, so like the cars, the voice lines, things like that, which was really interesting to hear. But if it wasn't a Simpsons game, I don't know how successful it would have been, but I know that's kind of the point of it. It's a bit of a paradox to say, oh, it won't be successful if it wasn't The Simpsons, but I think that just goes to show how much these people were Simpsons fans. And as I said, the whole game is just chock full of references. I mean, you've got Krusty Burger, you've got Moe's Tavern, and even when you go into Moe's Tavern, you've got things like the Flaming Moe's, you've got the Pickle Jar, you've got the Love Tester. Something that someone brought up, which I thought was really interesting, is there's a lot of landmarks and things that only appeared in one episode, but they still included them. So like the casino, which I think technically appeared in 2 episodes, but let's not get into that. But you've got Monty Burns' casino, you've also got the monorail that's there, you've also got a really niche reference, which I have to admit I never caught on to before, where they built, I can't remember what episode this is from, but it's when they build the massive magnifying glass at the end, but they've built it right beside a popsicle tower or something like that, or a tower of things. The only thing they didn't include with that was the, oh no, they did actually, oh my god, I was going to say they didn't include the escalator that goes nowhere, but they do right in the centre of town. Oh my god, I just noticed that, because I was like, is there an escalator in the middle of town? That is to say, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. Oh, my life's complete now. But honestly, this is a game that if you're a Simpsons fan, you haven't played this game, I would recommend it, but I would say go in with an air of caution that this is a game of the time, and by time I mean the gameplay and the graphics. If you're a diehard Simpsons fan and you're just looking for the references, you will love this game.
The funny thing about our discussion about whether or not this would do well if it wasn't a Simpsons game is that I can't really imagine it as anything other than a Simpsons game, because Simpsons is so integral to what that game is that it's hard to really say whether or not it would be a success or not, because I think that's partly what makes it good, is that it really is a true Simpsons game. It feels like a Simpsons game, not just another game that has Simpsons in it.
No, you're completely right. As much as you could think, oh, let's just put a generic town in place of Springfield, and I know people have created mods to connect all 3 of the areas, which I think is really cool. I wish we kind of saw a bit more of that in the game, but again, I know why they did it. It's probably because of hardware limitations and things like that.
Yeah.
So I can't be harsh on them. I can't be like, oh, why didn't they have the whole game? Because hindsight's a wonderful thing. I can't sit here with 2024 technology and be like, oh, why can't you make a game that fits into this floppy disk? And of course, Doom said, oh my beer. It would be interesting to see, but you're completely right. it's one of those few games that its identity as a Simpsons game is integral to how people really perceive it, I suppose is the right word. Because without The Simpsons, it's kind of a symbiotic relationship, isn't it? Without The Simpsons, this game probably wouldn't have taken off, but at the same time, The Simpsons probably needed a game like this to solidify itself. And it's so weird that beyond, as we said, the Simpsons game of the 2010s, the Lego Dimensions one, which is technically an offshoot, and Simpsons Tapped Out, there's not really been any other Simpsons games that have come out that have rose to such prominence.
Yeah, they really haven't.
Because I mean, as much as I like the Simpsons game and I appreciate the references as a video gamer, yeah, I don't see it being looked at the same.
Yeah, I don't either.
I mean, I don't want to say there was no love there, but in comparison, it's like night and day. Despite the janky graphics, despite the janky gameplay, and despite the horrible difficulty curve throughout the game, yeah, The Simpsons hit and run is just simply iconic, and I cannot praise it enough, to be honest. It's one of those weird things where I'm like, on the one hand, I should be telling you just to leave it alone, and if you have fond memories of this, then please do leave it alone. But then again, I am the same person who has Deadly Premonition in my top 10 games, so take of that what you will.
Yeah.
But on that note, Shadow, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this absolutely iconic game.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad I got to talk with you about it.
I have to admit, this was definitely a chance episode because you were saying how you just finished the game, and I was like, oh, when should we do an episode on it, Shadow? And you're like, well, I want to do it tomorrow. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Get on the mic.
Yes.
Before we wrap up, where can these lovely listeners at home find your content?
Well, as always, you can find me on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. I have Discord, pretty much anywhere with the SuperShadow271 username.
And if you want to listen to our last two episodes where we talked about the digitization of gaming as well as the Year of Shadow, the character, not yourself, but I wouldn't complain about either.
Yeah, I wouldn't complain either.
We've also talked about Sonic Frontiers. I've even done an interview with Shadow, and we have indeed talked about Sonic 06. So if you want to check out all of those episodes and more, then you can check out our website, chatsunami.com. I also want to thank our amazing Pandalorian patrons, Robotic Battle Toaster and Sonia. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And if you too want to become a Pandalorian patron, then you can check us out at patreon.com/Chatsunami. But until next time, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. And as always, stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, stay hydrated with a nice Buzz Cola. This episode sponsored by Buzz Cola.
It's for humans.
Yeah.